And let's take a look at the granddaddy of them all. And Kevin, this is one you had a question about earlier, which is how can you see all the gory details of the time that a person has entered? So I'm going to run this for all users and I'm going to run it for a quarter. So let's do second quarter 23-24. If you recall, when we were looking at the timesheet, we looked at a single user, single payroll period version of this report, and it was interesting, but it didn't have a whole lot of data in it. What I find people use the time audit report for mostly is they run it on an annual basis, and then they start using pivot tables to compare it to their AFS and to their contract reports and so on. So the time audit report we looked at before, it has all the details of the date, the employee, which timesheet category they entered the time under, which program and subprogram it was allocated to, if it was a weights and measures activity, what device type, whether it was direct or support time, if it was ag activity, which contract it was billed to, all the way through to hours, miles, expenses, and remarks. The two columns we didn't talk about are these two, AFS and CMR. So these two columns are designed to tell you where this time is going to end up on these two reports. Let's take CMR as an example. The first thing I'll do is I'm going to filter to exclude all the nones, because I'm at this point, I'm only interested in time that's going to end up on the CMR. And then within here, you'll see device hours. That means page 2. Support hours, which is the support hours box on page 1. Subprogram direct time. And then maybe in here, we'll see some indirect time. Not sure. They may not use that category. But now I've got this data filtered down to what I want it to be. If you're not familiar with Excel pivot tables, I highly recommend you do some learning on them, because I can run a pivot table on that data and say, give me the CMR category as my rows and the sum of hours as my values. And that tells me for that quarter, here's the total hours that I'm going to have reported: 555 device hours, 182 subprogram direct time, and 261 support hours. Now let's do the same thing, but instead of CMR, let's do that by AFS category. And in the AFS, I've got CDFA program direct time, CDFA subprogram allocation, that's time that's spread across all ag programs, PUE time, and other programs direct time. And then this none category is very important to look at, because this is time off. That's vacation time. That's not going to appear in the AFS. And that's the first category I'm going to want to compare and make sure that that calculation is correct, and somebody hasn't accidentally, billed time on, or I don't have a timesheet category that's accidentally set up without an AFS classification. So that becomes interesting, but then let's add subprogram to our pivot table. And now we'll say, oh, well, in my subprogram allocation, I've got 1,400 hours, and then by program, these are the total hours I have for that quarter. And in my PUE program, I've got now a nice breakout by all my different Pramer activities of what time that's billed to. And then for everything else I do, here's all the other programs that we operate in and total hours. So you can see I can get lost in the weeds here. There's a ton of investigation I can do. And all of that is driven by this very raw data that gives you essentially a full data dump of everything that we know about a person's time. Okay, so lots of good investigation to do there. The one thing that doesn't tell me, though, is some detail, Kevin, that you asked about on overtime breakouts. So we have another report called the, not under here, called the time codes report. And in this case, I'm going to run this for everyone, and I'll just run it for a month. Let's look at May. And the purpose of this report is to show that breakout of overtime categories and where time is being billed. So here's a list of all the different overtime codes and time codes that they use. And then here is a raw data dump of all the time, which program it's in, and which time code they build time to. So, and then I have a summary that just shows a cross tab of direct overtime, comp time, earned, various other codes for their time breakout. So, Kevin, have a look at that report, and then you and I can get together and have another conversation and see if there's any additional reporting we need to do around time codes build to get you the detail that you need. Okay, other reports are going to be of interest to everyone. Back on our time reports, various times people are going to have questions about total amount of time that's spent on parameter categories. And so we have a parameter time summary. And let me run this again for just a month. And this now gives me a breakout by parameter category for the month of the total hours, and then the raw data that goes into that calculation. So if I want to know, hey, I've got 12.8 hours for pest control records inspections, but I thought I should have more, I can now go in here and I can filter that on the parameter title and find all the individual records that make up that time. And that will help me narrow down if somebody says they did 6 hours, but I'm only seeing 5 hours here, then they might have reported it in the wrong place on their timesheet. So invariably, when counties switch from one system to another, there will be questions about the calculated parameter time, and we've preempted those by giving you the details you need in this report to figure that out.